This is day 3 of the 3 days to pay Dubsado Bootcamp. And my name is Cameron. I'm the Director of Education here at Dubsado. And we're going to get into the material today. So a quick recap of what we covered. I just want to make sure that we're aware of kind of what's been covered over these 3 days. Day 1, we kind of talked about the basics with settings and projects and clients. We also talked about packages and payment plans and invoicing. Day 1 was a pretty stacked day full of content. Yesterday, we talked about the 5 different form types, and then we zeroed in on lead capture forms, contracts, and proposals. Today, we're going to take all the things that we talked about over the last 2 days and put them in a bundle, and we're going to talk about sending this out to the client. So by the end of this webinar, these are some of the things that we want to cover. We want to learn how to combine the proposal, contract, and invoice so you can send it out in one smooth sequence to your client. We're going to talk about customizing proposals and sending them out to clients. So for any of you who are in that custom quote area for your business, we're going to be hitting on that today. We're also going to talk about understanding the client and business owner experience. What happens on my end as the business owner? What does the client see? And we're going to go back and forth so you can really get a good idea of what it looks like when you're going through this process. And then the last thing, it's kind of an additional point. We're also going to talk about countersigning contracts, just so you're aware how to do that. So let's go ahead here. And the first thing we're going to talk about today are proposal settings, because the settings of a proposal is going to be how you kind of make all this magic happen. We talked about proposals yesterday, but we're really going to dive into the settings today. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the catering proposal that we looked at yesterday. Remember, the catering proposal is actually the custom quote proposal that we were working on yesterday, where you have one package in here, the base placeholder package, and then we're going to customize this per client. So the proposal settings is over on the left-hand side. It's the second icon down, the little gear icon over there. And when you click on the form settings tab, it's going to give you a lot of other options that you can do with a proposal. So the first thing at the very top is you can include a contract to go with your proposal. The proposal is designed only to show your pricing. That's the only purpose of the proposal, your pricing, and to generate an invoice. The contract is where they're actually going to do the signing. We talked about that yesterday. So if I click yes on here, I can select from one of my base contract templates which one I want to go with this particular proposal. So I'm going to select the catering contract here. The other thing that you can do is down here, you can click include invoice. So when you click yes on here, what you're actually doing is once the client submits this proposal, you're wanting to show them the invoice at the end of this sequence. And this will all make more sense once we jump into a project here. So this is going to allow you to add a contract and the invoice that gets created all in one sequence, and the client can go through it in a seamless experience. Now, something that I am going to mention here before we move any further, you do not have to do both of these. You could do just proposal and contract and send the invoice at a later time. You could do proposal and invoice and just not have a contract in there, maybe send that later. Or you can just do proposal by itself and just send that out and then send a contract and invoice at a later time. One of the really cool things about Dubsado is you can kind of create your own combination that works best for your business. You don't have to do proposal, contract, and invoice. And I'm actually going to show you later in the webinar a different method on sending where you do the proposal first. Once they submit it, then send out the contract and invoice at a later time. So we'll talk about that later. But for right now, we're going to add my catering contract to this proposal. And we're also going to include the invoice as well, because we want the client to make a payment when they get to the end. Now, before we move any further here, I do want to talk about the contract that gets attached. You might have a question saying, okay, well, what if I'm doing the standard package proposals and my contract needs to change based off the package that they're selecting? So I'm going to save this for just a second, and I'm going to go over to the contract that's attached to this, because I want to explain something that we have in Dubsado. We talked about it a little bit yesterday with smart fields, and this is going to help so you don't have to necessarily customize the contract based off the package they select. So if we jump back over to forms here, we're going to take a little pause, and we're going to go into the catering contract. So this is the contract that I'm saying I want to go out with the proposal. And what I have inside the contract is I'm using Invoice Smart Fields. And Invoice Smart Fields, if you remember from yesterday, we said that Smart Fields autofill information that is available. So these Invoice Smart Fields, what they are going to do is they're going to take whatever was selected on the proposal, and they're going to put it on the contract so the client can see what was selected on the proposal, and then they can sign the contract based off of what they chose. So it is possible to have sort of a generic contract and use Invoice Smart Fields to autofill the correct selections from the proposal. And you'll be able to see this in real time as we do this in a project. But just so you know, that's what will help with not having to have 9 different contracts for different packages. You can use these Invoice Smart Fields to pull in the package data based off of what they selected. So that's just one thing I wanted to mention before we move forward with the proposal. So we'll go back there, and there's a couple more settings that we're going to talk about here, 2 more. The first one is this option right here that says allow client to choose multiple packages. In the settings on your proposal, you can decide if you want the client to be able to select multiple packages. If you're doing a standard package proposal with maybe some a la carte items or add-ons, you probably want this checked as yes, because you want them to select more than one. If you're only wanting them to choose one package on the proposal, you can leave this off, and then they're only able to choose one, which is really important. So because this is a custom quote and we only have one package on here, I'm just going to go ahead and leave that off. The last setting that I want to talk about is this drop down here that says payment plan. We talked about payment plans on day 1, where you can actually have your invoice broken down into installments. So now you can kind of start to see where we're headed. If I'm going to include the invoice at the end of this sequence that we're putting together, I also want to make sure that my payment plan is on that invoice. So that way, when they get there at the end, they can see, okay, the deposit is due today, and then the rest of it is due at a later time, or however your payment plan works. So if you have your payment plan created based off of day 1, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my fixed deposit, and you can pick one that you want to use here, but I'm going to pick my fixed deposit payment plan to go with this proposal contract and invoice combination. So they'll fill this out, sign the contract, get taken to the invoice where they can make their deposit. That's how that's going to flow there. So those are a couple of the settings that we wanted to look at there. The last thing that I want to talk about before we actually put this in a project, and I'm going to show you how to send this out, is with custom quotes. So everyone who's watching who is in that custom quote proposal, that's going to be what you want to use. In here, something that I usually recommend doing with a custom package is if we click on the package, over here on the left-hand side, you'll see where you can choose pre-selected. And the other thing that you'll notice is there's no select button in this area here. I've removed it out of this package element. The reason I did that is because when I send this out to a client, I don't want them to have to click and say select on this package, and then also at the very bottom have them submit the proposal. It's kind of redundant to do that. So what I like to do is remove the select button altogether so they can't select anything on here. And because it's pre-selected, now it's going to automatically select it in the background where they can't see that it's selected. And the only thing the client will need to do is when they get this proposal, they just click submit at the bottom if they think it looks good. So removing the select button and pre-selecting a custom package, it kind of removes some of the friction or extra steps they need to do. It automatically selects it for them. Now, you can put in your select button if you want to, but just know they'll have to click select and also submit at the bottom. And you'll see this here in a second when we do this live. So that is how you're going to basically customize your proposal to add in the different things like contract, invoice, maybe a payment plan if you want that as a part of your invoice. So the other thing that I have, and then we're going to move into sending it, is on the slides that I have, I do have a little screen share here or a screenshot of how to add the contract and invoice. So just in case you downloaded the handout, there's kind of a little cheat card here where you can see exactly where that's at, but it's underneath the forms settings tab. So now we're going to move into the good stuff. This is exactly what you're going to do once you have everything together and you're ready for this to go out to a client. We're going to dive into how to send a proposal, contract, and invoice. But before we do that, you know how I always like to take you at a 30,000 foot view and explain things first before we dive in to kind of the nitty gritty so it makes more sense. So if you take away anything from this webinar today, these next 3 slides are the most important thing to take away, because if you understand these concepts, it's going to help you tremendously once you actually get in and start sending things out. So the first thing that I want to talk about is adding a template to a project. And the reason I say adding a template to a project is because this is how it works for forms. It's how it works for scheduler templates, workflow templates, contract templates, packages, canned emails, you name it. Anytime you're adding a template into a project, you're taking your base template over here, you're adding it to the project, and what it does in the background is it creates a duplicate of your base template and then adds the duplicate into that project. Why is this important? Because once you put in a proposal into a project, you want to be able to customize that proposal for the client without changing your base template over here. And that's how it works for workflows, contracts, anything like that. The moment it goes into a project, it creates a duplicate. And now I can make all the changes and customizations I need to do without impacting my base template in my forms area. So that is a huge piece of Dubsado. It is massive when it comes to templates. So as long as you understand that concept, it will suit you very well moving forward. The next thing that I want to talk about is kind of to go one step further and talk about how the proposal process works in Dubsado. So this is right now, it looks kind of crazy, but it'll make more sense once we talk through it, and I'll show this to you live so it makes sense here. So the first thing here, let's say you're going to send out a proposal to the client. What I have is I have the back end view, which is the bottom. This is something that is only facing you as the business owner. And then I have the client view, what the client is experiencing. And this chart here is going to kind of help you understand the flow of what happens when you send out a proposal, contract, and invoice. The first thing is when you add a proposal into a project, remember it creates a duplicate. The second thing that happens is it creates an empty invoice inside of your project, only on the back end. It creates a blank invoice in there. The reason for that is the system is prepping for when they do make their selections on the proposal, it has something to go on to. So very important, the moment you add a proposal into a project, it makes a blank invoice. Then you can send the proposal out to the client. The proposal gets submitted by the client. And then once they submit it, whatever package or combination of packages they did on the proposal, that goes onto that empty invoice that got created back at step 2. So they submit the proposal, their selections go onto the invoice that was created. Then they're taken to the contract. Remember, they go from proposal straight to contract. This happens in the background. Once they get to the contract, they can sign it and then they can go to the invoice and make a payment. So a question that we get a lot is, how do invoice smart fields populate on contracts? It's because when they submit that proposal, it actually creates the invoice and puts everything on there for you. So by the time that they go to the next tab, which is the contract, it already has the invoice created with all of their selections on there. So if you can understand this flow of how proposals work, it will help you understand when you're doing this on the back end, what's actually happening in real time as they go through these different pieces of the sequence. So one other thing that I want to create an analogy with this proposal flow is this example here. Let's say you're going to a restaurant, and when you sit down at your table, the restaurant prints out a blank receipt. So that's where the proposal's getting added to the project and an empty invoice is getting created. You sit down at the table, they print out a blank invoice or a blank receipt, if you will. Then when the waiter hands you the menu and you pick what you want, that is the proposal sent and proposal submitted. So you're choosing what you want. Once you've done that, now they take what you want and they put it on the receipt. And then of course, once you're done, you need to sign the receipt and pay. So this example, this kind of restaurant analogy, hopefully this can kind of solidify what's happening in Dubsado when you're using that proposal, this kind of restaurant metaphor there. So the next thing that we're going to do now is actually show you this conceptual idea in Dubsado so you can kind of put the two together. So let's go to the proposal here. I have my settings set up. Everything's good. I have include contract, include invoice. Let's go ahead and save this. And I'm going to go to my test project that I've been using throughout this bootcamp here. So I go into my project. Now, if I go up to forms, and actually just want to make sure that I have a clear project here. So when I go to the forms tab, because I'm wanting to send out a proposal to the client, I'm going to go to the forms tab here. When you go to the forms tab and you click this drop down, this is going to show you all of your base templates. So this is a list of all of those forms that are in my templates area. I'm going to go to the catering proposal and I'm going to click on it. And it's going to show me a quick little preview here of the proposal. So this is going to look how it looked in the base template view here. One thing you will notice is that it auto-filled the name of the person whose project it is. When I use those smart fields, because this is in a project now, it has data to put in that first name bracket area. So if we're using that same conceptual idea we just talked about, when I click add up here at the top, I have now made a copy of my base template. And now whatever I'm doing with this proposal is only going to change what happens in this project. I'm no longer working off of my base template anymore. Now, if you have just a standard package proposal, you don't need to make any tweaks to this. Everything is good as it is. You can simply click send right here and then send it out to the client. You don't have to make any changes or updates. So if you're in that kind of standard package proposal realm, you don't need to make any updates. Just go ahead and send it out to the client. However, I do want to show you how to customize this. So I have this proposal here. Let's say I've talked to the client. I know what they need. I can click edit here and I can open up the proposal inside this client's project. And something that's new with this form builder is up here in the top left, you'll see that it will show you what project you're in. So now I know for sure that I'm editing the proposal that is inside of this project now. So let's put it in a real world scenario. Let's say I've sat down with the client and they told me exactly what they need for this catering event. And we've had the consultation. I know what they want. I'm going to click into this particular package here, my placeholder base package. And right up here in this little side panel, you're going to see where it says edit package. When you click on that, now what I'm able to do is I can customize this package to make the tweaks that I need based off the specifications of the client. So let's say that there's going to be 120 people at this event that are going to have food. So if I click on this little drop down arrow, and as if you remember from day one, this kind of looks familiar with editing an invoice. So we'll click edit, and now I can make these changes. So let's say that they wanted to have garlic bread. And for the salad, we're going to do Caesar, just like last time. Entree, we'll say spaghetti is what they're feeling. And then for dessert, we're going to say brownie. So I'm customizing this based off of the tweaks that the client wants or the customizations. Now, like I said, there's going to be 120 people there. So I'm going to do 120. And then if I want to change the price, I can change that as well, but we'll leave it at 68. And then once I'm done, I can click save item and it's going to update that line item. Let's also say that 60 people are going to do the premium bar service. So I'm going to click the drop down here and click edit. And then here, I'm going to say 60 for the quantity because 60 people are going to do the bar service. And once I've done that, all I have to do is click apply up at the top here. And now you'll see that my quote has changed. And again, this is just for this proposal in this project. Now everything is looking good for my client. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this little drop down and I'm going to say save and close. If you just click save, it's going to keep this page open. But if you do save and close, what it actually does is it saves it. And then it takes you back to the forms page. So it's just a little bit quicker to do save and close. Now, a couple things before we move into sending this. The first thing is that you'll notice when I added in the proposal, it also added in the contract with it. And again, it is a duplicate of the base contract template. And the reason it added this in there as well is because I connected it in the settings. As long as you have those two things connected, contract and invoice, it will pull in that contract with it. The other thing you'll notice is that the badge that's underneath here says needs sending, and it also says that on the contract. What this means is that this proposal and contract has not gone out to the client yet. It's kind of hanging out in the project until I'm ready to send it. So the client can't see what I've done. They have no idea that I'm working on this proposal. Now, one more thing before we actually send this is if I go to the invoices tab right now, if you remember from kind of the conceptual idea, the moment that you add a proposal into a project, it creates a blank invoice in here. There are no line items on this proposal right now. It's all blank. Now, one thing you will see is that their payment plan is added to this blank invoice because remember, in the settings on the proposal, I added in that payment plan. So it gets put on this empty invoice because it's just prepping for whenever they submit the proposal, that custom package is going to get added onto this actual invoice. So hopefully that makes sense. I added it to the project, blank invoice gets created. Now I'm going to send it to the client. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the forms. And if you're somebody who just wants to double check, or I guess triple check a third time, is if you click view on this form now, you can actually preview the form with all of the updates in it again before you send it out to the client. So I'm looking at this again. You can see I have my garlic bread, all the things that I put in there, the quantity and price is all up to date how I want it. So you can always preview this again if you want to. But now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click send on here, and it's going to pop up that email composer. Now, on the first day, we talked about sending an invoice and how it creates that button to click on. It does the exact same thing here. So now I have created this, this email. If I want to change it up, I can. But then once they actually click on this button in the email, it's going to open it up and they can go through the sequencing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click send just to kind of send it off. Now, I'm not going to actually go into my email and show you all of that. But what I am going to show you, because you all are business owners here, is I'm going to show you how you can test this for yourself. And what you're actually going to want to do to test this and see what the client sees is if you open up this form in the preview modal again. So we'll just preview this again. What you can do as the business owner, I definitely encourage you to go into your email and see what it looks like just so you get familiar with it. But what you can do to speed the process up is if you click copy link right here and copy the link to this specific form. And then what you would do is open up an incognito window. So what you can do, and I'm actually going to do this in a separate window, and then I'm going to switch screens so you can see what I'm doing here. But if you open up the form in an incognito window, that's what Chrome calls it, or a private window is what Safari calls it, I believe. If you copy that link and paste it in a private window, what it's going to do is open up the form how the client would see it. The reason that you have to open it up in that incognito window is because Dubsado can tell that you're logged in as the business owner. So if you just open up the form, it's going to be how the business owner would see it, not the client. So by opening it up in that incognito window, now you can see exactly what the client sees. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch screens with you here really quickly. So just give me a moment to stop sharing this screen, and then I'm going to flip over to a different window just so you can see what's going on here. And let's see, where is that at? My other screen here. There it is. Okay. And so we'll share this one. So now what we're looking at is if someone clicks on that proposal, it's going to open up this screen here. This is now the client view of things. So you've already made your customizations. Now you've sent it out to the client. This is what the client is going to see. The first thing I'll draw your attention to is up across the top, you'll see that there's a proposal, the contract, and the invoice in 3 separate tabs. It's all one link, but it's 3 kind of separate templates all in one sequence. So they're going to be able to move through this without having to go to a different link or a different page or anything like that. So I'm receiving this as the client, and I'm seeing that all of this here has all the specifications that I asked for. If everything looks good, you'll see the total at the bottom. Now, what has happened, if you remember from this proposal, I pre-selected the package and I got rid of the select button. So there's no select button for them to click on here because that would kind of be redundant. They would have to click select and click submit and next at the bottom. So you don't really need to do it that way. You can remove that select button and then it's pre-selected in the background. So it shows the total down here as well. So I'm looking at this, everything looks great. I'm ready to move forward. So I'm going to click submit and next. Now, remember, the moment that I did that, what it did was it took that custom package and it added it to that empty invoice. So we had that empty invoice, then it actually got put onto that invoice. So now I'm on the contract section here. The other thing you'll notice is that I was using client smart fields on my contract. So it's auto-filling client information here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in my initials. I'll put that in there. And then I can put in initials there on all the different things there. It has the payment plan in there. And actually, I think I did not add in the smart fields for the actual invoice to show on this particular contract, but we'll talk about that in a little bit here. So with the two initials elements, you can sign off on those. And then if you scroll down further, I can actually go in here and I can sign my contract. So I'll come in and act like the client and sign off on there. If you recall from the webinar yesterday, down here at the bottom, you can actually create a signature area for the business owner to sign off on. And you'll notice here that I can't fill this out as the client. That's because it's for the business owner to sign. So this was the client one, and this is the business owner one. Once I'm done there, I can click agree and submit and go to the actual invoice here. So when I get to the invoice, now what you're actually seeing is the breakdown of what I actually did on the proposal. So it's showing it at the end. It's kind of like the shopping cart once you pick what you want on Amazon. So now I can see everything here. So 120, there's my pricing. And you'll also notice that now my payment plan is showing dates. The first one is for today, and because it's after I sign the contract. And then at the bottom, that's going to be when my second payment is due for the $7,800. So now, as the client, I can go through and I can click pay now. Now, I'm not actually going to make this payment because I'm not going to put $1,000 onto this invoice. But what I can show you is what happens once they do make that payment. So let me jump back here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen again. And I'm going to go back over to my other screen, which was inside of Dubsado. So let me go back. I'm going to share my screen with you here. And we'll open this one up again. And so now we're back in Dubsado. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out of this window and I'm actually going to refresh my page. And what you're going to notice once I do this is that the proposal is now completed because I completed it as the client. The contract is signed. And if I go to the invoice now, you're going to see that package now on the invoice, and the payment plan is down here at the bottom. So we talked about this on day one about applying a payment to an invoice. So what you can do here is you can click apply payment. We're just going to pretend like I made this payment. So we'll do apply payment. And then let's say that I just paid via Stripe. I know that it actually, you could do it through Stripe on the invoice, but we'll just do this manually. Stripe for $1,000, and we'll click apply. Once I've done that, you'll see the payment has generated down here at the bottom, and you'll see that that first installment is now grayed out with the payment reminder not going out like what we talked about on day one. So that is going to be what it looks like once they've gone through that sequence. my proposal's completed, they signed the contract, and they've paid the invoice. The last thing that I want to show you here, and then we're going to move on to the next section, is countersigning the contract. So I've gotten everything taken care of, but I need to go in and countersign that contract. So if I go up to where the contract is at and I click this drop down, now I can click open and I can just open up this contract, and it's going to open it up as the business owner. And how you can tell is there's a nice banner across the top up here. So it's telling me that I'm viewing this as the business owner, not the client. If I did an incognito window, then it would be the client view. So now, since I'm looking at this as the business owner, I can come down to the bottom, and I know this will look weird, but I'm going to put in my name again, and I'm going to sign this as the business owner, and then I'll click countersign down at the bottom, and it'll say, boom, thank you. The form has been submitted. So now I've done my counter signature and everything is good to go inside of this project here. So when it comes to doing proposal, contract, and invoice, that's the sequence that you're going to go through. Add in the proposal, make your tweaks if you need to, then send it. And then the client will go through that proposal, contract, and invoice sequence. And then you can come back in and countersign it once they're done doing all of that. The other thing that I'll point out, I didn't have this in my notes, but I'll just add it in, is up at the top. If I click my notification bell, you'll see that the catering proposal has come through, that they completed that, and the contract has been signed. If they made a payment through the payment processor, it would say Cameron Macbeth has made a payment as well. I would have had a third notification, but because I did it manually, I don't get a notification for that. It's only if they pay through the invoice. So I would have gotten 3 notifications there, and I'll just do mark all as red to get rid of that there. So that is the process from front to back. I know it seems like it took a long time because I was explaining everything, but once you get comfortable with this, you can make changes very fast, send out your proposal, and it's very quick to do. And it all is because you started off with your base template and you only had to make a couple tweaks to it. So that's going to be how that works there. Now, the next thing that we're going to get into is you might be in a position where you say, I don't really want to do a proposal, contract, and invoice. I'd rather have them just fill out the proposal first and then maybe send out the contract and invoice after that. Maybe I really do need to make some big tweaks to the contract as far as language before I let them see it. Or maybe depending on what package they choose, I might need to apply a different payment plan depending on which route they're going down. So what I want to do next is we're going to talk about kind of the same thing, except we're only going to do proposal first, and then we're going to do contract and invoice together, because there might be some of you watching who this is more of your wheelhouse. So I wanted to talk about this method. And then once we're done with this, we'll open it up for questions. So let's go back to Dubsado here. And as the business owners, when you're doing your testing, what I recommend doing is before you do your next test, remove everything out of your project first. So I'm going to remove my contract and just remove that out of there. With invoices, you do have to delete your payment first. So make sure that payment is gone. And then underneath the invoice list, you can delete your invoice as well. So we're going to remove all of that. We're going to remove the proposal as well. So that's not in the project. And now I'm starting out from scratch. So I can reuse this again and I can use it as a test. So with this here, now what I'm going to do first before I go through and show you how to do this is I need to go to my proposal. And for this one, I'm going to use my wedding photography proposal, the package proposal that we looked at yesterday as well. So with this proposal, what I want to make sure of is that in the settings on this proposal, I have contract off. We don't want to include the contract here. And then the invoice is also turned off. I don't want that there either. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to remove the payment plan on there as well, because what I'm going to do, and I'm going to pretend to do here, is based off of the package or combination of packages they choose, I'm going to need to have a different payment plan get put on the invoice. So I'm going to show you how to do that here. So let me save this. And now we're going to jump over to the contract, because I want to make sure that I have the correct smart fields in here so that you can see what it's supposed to look like. My other contract did not have that. So I'm going to make sure that I'm adding in my correct smart fields here: invoice, item names, and amounts. Perfect. Just want to double check that so it looks right whenever you see it this time. So if we go underneath forms and we go to the projects, we're going to go back to my sample project, of course. And now we're going to go underneath the forms, same idea, click this drop down, and then we're going to go down till we find my wedding photography proposal. And we're going to click that, and we're going to say add. Now remember, creating a duplicate here. And for some reason, oh, this is the wrong one. It was the one that was supposed to say webinar. My apologies. Let me delete that. I clicked on the wrong one. I have too many wedding photography proposals in here. So the wedding photography proposal webinar, there we go. So I click on this here and I click add. And what you're going to notice is that no contract showed up this time because I disconnected it in the settings. So I've made a copy in this project. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click send. So I'm just going to send out this proposal by itself, and we're going to send that off to the client. They're going to get the proposal on their end. Now remember, in the invoices section, oh, it actually, because of that old proposal that I put in there that had a payment plan on it, it actually added the payment plan to this invoice. So let me remove this here really quickly. Sorry about that. So with this, once I send out that proposal, it's going to make this invoice. However, it's not going to have the payment plan on there if you disconnected it in the settings. It's just going to be this empty invoice here. So now let me go to the proposal, and I'm going to fill it out as if I was the client. So I'm going to click copy link, just like we did last time. And I'm going to jump over to my incognito window and open it up there so you can see. So let me switch screens one more time here. We're going to get rid of this screen, and then we're going to share this screen here. So this will pop up, and what you're going to see is now there is no contract and invoice anymore. It's just proposal. So as the client, I can come through, read through this. Okay, choose one main package. What I'm going to pick is going to be the essential package. And let's say that we also want to do rehearsal coverage, and let's also do a first look 2-hour session as well. So this is your standard package idea. What I'm doing is I'm basically building out what the invoice is going to have. It's different than sending out just that custom quote. I'm actually building my invoice right now. So all of this looks good. And as you can see, there's a total on the bottom based off of everything that I've picked here. And now I'm going to click submit. And that's going to take those package selections and put it onto that empty invoice like what we were talking about. So now let's switch screens here again. We're going to go back over to the business owner view. So let me pop open my other screen here. And we'll go back to where we were, which is on this screen. And what you're going to see when I refresh my page is you're going to see that the proposal got completed just like last time. So it has that little completed badge next to it. And if we go to the invoice, you'll notice that everything that I selected is now on that empty invoice. Now, the reason that you might want to do it this way is because you might say, if they do the essential package, I want them to do a fixed deposit payment plan. Or if they did a different package, maybe they do a 50-50 payment plan. So now I see that they did essential package. So I can just come in here and I can add my fixed deposit payment plan in here. So now that's going to divide everything out. So I have my payment plan on there. My invoice is ready to go. Now, let's say I'm ready to do contract and invoice together. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come up to the top and I'm going to grab my contract. So I click on this here and I'm going to grab my wedding photography contract. And what you're going to see, because I have the right smart field in on this contract, is you're going to see that it's actually pulling from that invoice and it's showing exactly what it is that they're making their payment on or what was on that invoice. It's pulling from that primary invoice in the project. So now, once this is in here, I'm going to click add. So now again, it's making a copy and putting it in the project. And then what I can do is I can click send on this and it's going to open up that email composer. And now I'm going to show you a little trick here. So I have the contract in here, but I also want to include this invoice that you're seeing as well. What you can do to include this invoice is you can click into the email body. And then down here, there's a little list icon is what I call it. It's a little list icon that's next to your canned emails. When you click on this, it's going to show you everything that is in this project right now. So as you can see, the invoice is right here. So if I click on this, I can add the invoice to this particular, to this email, and I can send it out to the client. So now they can do contract and invoice in the same email. Now, a question that you might be having is, oh, it looks like it's covering that up. Let's see if there's a way to, there's not really a way to change that. Let's see here. This will probably shrink it a little bit. Maybe this will help out a little bit if I slide that over. Let me know if you all can see that a little bit better there if I slide the email over or the window over there. But with this, what you're able to do is send out the contract and the invoice in the same email. Now, you might have the question of, can I do just contract and invoice in a tab together? Right now, you're not able to do that. How you get that 3-tab sequence is only by including the proposal into the entire sequence. That's really what gives you that 3-tab look across the top. So if you're wanting to do proposal first, and then you want to do contract and invoice, they will need to do it in this way with the email where you have the 2 buttons in there, and then they can sign and pay. So let me go back. I'm going to redo that again so you all can see exactly what I did there. So once I had the contract in here and I clicked send, it pulls up this email composer. And then what you're going to do is down at the bottom, you'll see the little list icon down here. It's right next to your canned emails. When you click that, it's going to show you all of the templates that are in your project right now. So form templates, contract templates, invoice templates, all of that. So when I click on this, actually, let me make sure I'm in the body of the email first. When I click on this, it's going to add it to the bottom. So that's where you can access the templates that are inside of your account there, or sorry, within your project. So that is how you can include all of that together. So the last thing that I want to talk about, and then I'll open it up for questions, is the homework, of course. So we've gone through how to combine everything. Remember, you can do any combination that you want to, but hopefully the 2 methods that I showed you today fits with most people here. So with the homework, what I want you to do is send out a proposal, contract, and invoice to yourself in a sample project, exactly like what I did today. You can continue to test this as much as you want until you get comfortable and then use it on a real client. So feel free to send it as much as you want to yourself. There's no need to worry about, is this going to look right? You can test it out as much as you need to until you feel comfortable. Then the second thing is go out and get a booking. Now that you know about lead capture forms and packages and all of this good stuff, you can create your own sequence. Once a new project gets created, you can send them a proposal and get them booked. So one other thing that I wanted to mention here before I open it up for questions is there's a really big myth with Dubsado that you have to have workflows set up in order to use the system. Everything has to be automated in order for you to do anything in the system. And as you can see over these last 3 days, you absolutely do not need to have workflows in order to use Dubsado. You can use this manually for as long as you want to while you learn workflows and get your workflows built. So feel free to do things manually. There's no shame in going in and just getting a new project in there and sending out a proposal to them and get a booking. Don't get too bogged down with having to have all the bells and whistles and workflows and everything. It's great to have, don't get me wrong, but it's not needed in order to use the system. So I just wanted to say that here at the end of this boot camp, because what this was designed to do is to show you how to be able to go in and get things rolling versus having to think about, okay, what's my process? What workflows do I want to build? I wanted to make this really practical.